Hello, this is a presentation to share with you an overview of competency-based teaching and learning. Competency-based teaching and learning are two sides of the same coin. You cannot have one without the other. When we talk about competency-based teaching, we have to talk a little bit about competency-based learning as well, because one does not exist without the other. Whenever there is teaching of any kind, there is learning taking place. Sometimes the very thing we are teaching isn't what is being learned, but there is learning taking place there nonetheless. When we have competency-based teaching plus competency-based learning, we get competency-based education, which is the all-encompassing term for what we're about to take a look at. So here is our definition of competency-based teaching and learning. They allow students to move through grade level standards at their own pace, moving on when they are ready. That's quite different from what we do in traditional classroom settings. The idea of providing for the success of all students is certainly not a new one, but it is a challenging one. It means there is some training teachers must undergo in order to make this happen. It also means that students must be trained to learn in a different way. It also means that as the teacher, we don't just look at the whole group sitting in front of us, but we begin to look at individuals. The main principles of competency-based education include the bulleted list that you see on the screen. As you look at these principles, which of these can you implement in your classroom tomorrow? Which of these principles will require the support of the school administration? Which of these principles will require the support of parents? Which of these principles will require that students understand exactly what is happening in the classroom? Which of these principles will be easy to implement? What do you think about these principles? How do you feel about these principles? All of this has to be taken into consideration if we are going to move to the structure that competency-based education requires. These are some darling babies that you see in front of you, but I put them there so that they will help us to really understand how we as human beings learn. Babies get fully immersed, fully engaged when they are learning. They see, touch, taste, smell, listen in order to learn. When children come to school, they are expected to learn primarily by seeing and listening. They are expected to sit quietly and listen, and many of them are just unable to do so. When they leave school in the afternoon, they can revert to learning with their whole bodies again. Just take a look at them when they're playing, and you will see all of the learning going on. Competency-based learning allows students to become immersed in the learning at their own rate. Will all of these babies learn to walk at the same time? Probably not. Will all of these babies learn to talk at the same time? Probably not. Will they all learn to use a spoon or a fork at the same time? Probably not. But they will all learn those things. And so babies teach us that we may learn at a different pace or a different rate than someone else, but we do learn. And as an aside, I have 2 children, and when they were little, my son started walking at 9 months. My daughter, however, didn't start walking until 15 months, but they both learned to walk. That's the thing that babies teach us. We don't all learn it at the same time or the same pace, but we do learn it. Concept of competency-based education. The first one is that it is student-centered and not teacher-centered. It is learner-focused and learner-directed. The teacher determines specific learning outcomes in terms of behavior and performance, but the teacher becomes more of a resource and a monitor. And then the teacher also determines the criteria for evaluating achievement. The teacher is the one who decides how he or she will have the student show mastery. Here are 2 main resources in the classroom that children can use when they are being self-directed and self-monitoring. When designing their own learning, the teacher becomes one of the many resources available to the students. Other students can also be resources as well. 1 or 2 students working on the same skill or concept who work at about the same pace can work together to learn the skill or concept they need in order to show mastery. Competency-based teaching and learning can be implemented at all levels, kindergarten to college and beyond. Students have choices, and when students have choices, they become more engaged with the learning. And if they become more engaged with the learning, they learn more, and they're able to demonstrate that mastery to their teacher and to others. Interesting thing about this, you may have some students who are working above grade level in one competency and below grade level in another competency. And that's okay, because that's how we are as human beings. We don't all get to the top of every aspect of our lives at the same time. And some of us may never get to the top in some areas in our lives, but we're all working toward that. Every grade level and every discipline in that grade level has objectives to be mastered by the students. In mathematics, it may be the computation of fractions. In language class, it might be writing a nonfiction story. In science class, it might be knowing different kinds of rocks and the significance of each. Whatever the class, the teacher knows what competencies have to be learned and mastered. So the teacher is able to plan work for the students that will enable the students to become competent in the various disciplines. The teacher also knows what resources will be most helpful to the student in learning these competencies. And the teacher knows how to best design strategies for the students to demonstrate mastery. When teachers are designing work for students to do, there are a couple of things they should have in their lesson planning toolbox. One of those tools that teachers should have is the understanding of Bloom's taxonomy. Bloom's taxonomy is a good structure for helping us to get children from the recalling of facts up to the create level. And as you look at each level of this taxonomy, you can see how the children's thinking has to grow as well as mastery of skills and concepts. When using Bloom's taxonomy while planning work for students, teachers help to move them or move their thinking from one level to the next level so that they eventually get to the highest level, and that is the one of creating. Notice the statements over on the left. They tell us exactly what children are able to do at each level of Bloom's taxonomy. The first one at the bottom, remember. That means they can recognize and recall facts. One step up is to understand. That means they understand what the facts mean. The next level, they can apply the facts. They can apply the facts, the rules, the concepts, the ideas, the skills, and they can apply them in a way that is created and designed by the teacher to show this application. Then we move them up to analyzing. They can break down the information into component parts, understand the component parts, put the component parts back together to get the whole. Next, they can evaluate. That means they can judge the value of information or ideas. And then at the very top, they can take all of those ideas and facts that they've learned, combine them, and create something brand new. That's where we want to get our students, because creating requires all of the students, all of us, to be able to move through all the levels of Bloom's taxonomy. Another tool that's good to have in your lesson planning toolbox, an understanding of knowledge work. And there are 10 components of knowledge work. And this term, knowledge work, was created by Dr. Phil Slechte back in the 1990s when he was quite concerned about the kind of work we give children to do in the classroom. Because remember, the work we give them is designed to teach them. And if they're not learning from the work we're giving them, then we have to redo the work. And so as you look at these 10 components, the first one is content and substance. We have to have content, and that content should have substance. You're not learning something just to learn it. You're learning it because it will have an impact on your life. The information should be product focused. Students should be able to create something as a result of having learned what you've taught them or what they've just gotten. The information should be organized in such a way that students can follow it easily. It should have clear and compelling product standards. If I create this, what are the standards by which I must create it in order to show mastery? They should be protected from adverse consequences for their initial failures. Whenever any of us learn something new, we don't all get it perfectly at the first time. So when children make initial mistakes, when they're learning something new, that's a time to encourage as opposed to admonish. Affiliation simply means there should be time to talk to the people in the classroom. There should be time to talk to my classmates. There should be time to talk to the teacher or to talk to whomever is there that can help them to learn what you're teaching. We want to affirm their efforts. We want to tell them that I really like the way you did your math today. All of these computations are correct. This history story that you wrote is fabulous. I enjoyed reading it. That display of your rocks is great. It shows you really understand the differences that the various rocks have. Choice. We mentioned choice once before. When we give children some choices in the classroom, there is more engagement by the students in the learning, and so the students are learning more. There should be novelty and variety. Every now and then you should shake things up. If you come to your classroom and you do the same thing the same way every day, nothing changes. Kids know exactly what you're going to do, what you're going to say, when you're going to do it, and when you're going to say it. That becomes a place where there's very, very little learning going on. But every now and then, when you change something, when you make something novel or new, or you add variety, kids buy into that. And when they do, they get engaged with the learning and they learn more. And of course, the last one is it should be authentic. Whatever we're teaching should be true and real and authentic, and the kids know that. Let's take a look at how we can compare the traditional classroom and the competency-based classroom. Well, the first thing that you see is that in a traditional structure, the classroom is teacher-centered. That means the teacher is working constantly. The teacher is the all-wise, all-knowing one person in the room who has all of the information, who knows all of the skills, and consequently is disseminating that to the children. Many years ago, when I was a classroom teacher, I went to a convention and heard a speaker. And something that speaker said has stuck with me all of these years. He said, when you go into any classroom, the hardest working person in the classroom is the teacher. End of quote. And you and I both know that's true. I went back to my classroom after hearing that, and I changed a few things. Up until then, I was the hardest working person in my room. And I changed that because I wanted my kids to work harder. I really wanted them to be as tired as I was when they went home in the evening. And so I began to work them differently. You want to do the same thing with your classroom. And what we would love for a visitor to say when they leave our classrooms, that is a classroom of hard-working students. And the teacher is a great resource for them. In the traditional classroom, kids take a test and move on no matter what they do on that test. And so they can get an A, B, C, D, some kind of letter grade. And the E's and D's move along with the A's and B's. That shouldn't be. Doesn't matter what grade you get, you just move on. But in the competency-based structure, that doesn't happen. If you didn't understand the lesson and your grade is not what it should be, then you have to interact with that lesson a little bit longer until you truly understand the concept or skill that is being taught. That's a whole different way of looking at assessment. Here are a few strengths of competency-based education. Our students learn through and experience a large variety of ways to learn and ways to show mastery. Educators are better able to address the specific academic needs of the non-traditional learner. Students are able to use their time of learning in a variety of ways, as well as where they learn. Some learning can take place outside, or on the steps of the classroom, or in another classroom, in a variety of places. Our students are encouraged to be productive. Just imagine that something one of these students produces could be used to help another student learn. The goal is mastery, not just to be passed on to the next level, not just to spend time in a classroom, but mastery. Our students are not only more confident in the learning environment, but they're more confident people in all walks of life. Would you like to see competency-based education implemented in your school? Why or why not? Have a conversation with your peers about this. Remember that coin? Remember that on one side was competency-based teaching, and on the other side was competency-based learning? Well, we've put them together, we've made them into education, and we've got a brief summary about all that you have seen in this presentation. And I'll give you a minute to just look through that. Would you like to see what is described on the screen in your classroom?